Right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for our artist talk with Marcelo Eli Sarmiento, who currently has an exhibition up at Compound Yellow. It is also a part of the Takeover Residency that AMFM has been doing at Compound Yellow. We started last month and we will be continuing this residency until the end of the month. We've been really grateful to be able to share space there, to curate exhibitions and host programming, and are super grateful to them for welcoming us into their space. My name is Sierra McKissick. I'm the founder of AMFM and curator and programmer in Chicago as well. I'm so thrilled to be joined by our esteemed artists and speakers today. We have Marcelo Sarmiento, Eli Sarmiento here, who will be sharing about his artistic practice. And we also have Cesáreo Moreno, the chief curator of the National Museum of Mexican Art, who will be in conversation with Marcelo today. I'll share a bit more about our speakers and a little bit about the exhibition that I curated there at the space Compound Yellow. So the exhibition is called De Sangre, de Tierra y de Oro, which translates to Of Blood, of Earth, and of Gold. The title is a reference to his bloodline, his ancestral connection, and our connection to the earth and indigenous cultures. In these selected work, Eli primarily works in oil paint and pastels and experiments with watercolor, text, and using his ink drawing practice as a base to present his research and visual studies exploring the cultural roots of ancient Mexico and Mesoamerica. Through this process, he presents the human figure and its representation to give weight, importance, and attention to how the Mexican and Mesoamerican Indians presented themselves through artifacts and historical emblems. This process of uncovering his cultural heritage and ancestors, their history, theology, living practices, and artistic expressions is a way for him and the viewer to connect and identify with a cultural influence that isn't considered or spotlighted in the US, especially as first and second generation US citizens are oftentimes disconnected from the source, archaeological sites, people, and culture of their roots. This exhibition offers a space for memory and healing from the generational trauma of unknowing. The works from this exhibition span across 5 years from 2016 to 2021. And his first solo exhibition since 2017, Eli's work has matured and evolved not only in medium, but also in focus, from roaming the rooms of old masters in art of the Americas at the Art Institute to his first visit outside of the US to Mexico in late 2015 to learn about the vastly rich, powerful, and beautiful history of Mexico and Mesoamerica. The subject has found its way into visual language to refine and focus on a body of work that presents the beginning of a journey of discovery and research in tune with his Latinx heritage. So that's just a bit about the exhibition. I read the exhibition statement. If you haven't been to see the exhibition at Compound Yellow, we do have gallery hours Wednesday, so tomorrow from 6 to 8 p.m. And we also have gallery hours Saturdays from 2 to 6 p.m. at Compound Yellow as well. So we hope to see you there. I'm going to tell you a bit about our artist and the curator that he'll be in conversation with. Marcelo Eli attended the Academy of Art University's painting and drawing BFA program in San Francisco, California, and later pursued an independent direction. He's a 2016 participant in Hyde Park Art Center's Center program and attended the Visual Arts Certificate program at the University of Chicago's Graham School. Marcelo has participated in group exhibitions throughout Chicago and New York, including recently Friedman Gallery, Uncurated Gallery, as well as artist-run spaces such as the Hyde Park Art Center, Wedge Projects, AMFM Gallery, and Chucamarca. Marcelo's solo exhibitions include Hinman Auctioneers, Congruent Space, Blanc Gallery, and the current exhibition up at Compound Yellow. So everyone, please welcome and say hello to Marcelo. Thank you, thank you.
Hello, everybody. Nice to meet you. Nice to see you. Thank you for being here today.
Yes. And Cesáreo Moreno has been with the National Museum of Mexican Art since 1992. He has been the visual arts director since 1995 and was named the museum's first full-time chief curator in 2004. Moreno has curated numerous exhibitions for the National Museum of Mexican Art. Amongst his most important assignments are Arte Diseño Chicago, a declaration of immigration in 2008, The African Presence in Mexico from Yanga to the Present in 2006. Additionally, he has curated 14 of the annual Day of the Dead exhibitions to date and the permanent exhibition Nuestras Historias, Stories of Mexican Identity from the Permanent Collection. Moreno has served as a juror and panelist for various organizations, including the Center Program Visitor at Hyde Park Art Center in 2018 and 2021, the Chicago Department of Cultural Affairs Advisory Committee in 2020 to 2021, the Art Institute of Chicago's Equity and Museum Practice Advisory Committee 2018 through 2020, the Tierra Foundation for American Art and Advisory Committee in 2016 to 2018, Propeller Fund Awards, Chicago Artist Coalition's Makers Grant, and Mentor Curator for their Hatch Projects and 3 Arts Awards panel, and the UIC Latino Cultural Center Ambassador Program. Everyone, please welcome Cesáreo Moreno. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to our speakers tonight, and we're going to jump into this conversation about this wonderful exhibition. Thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you.
That's a wonderful introduction. Thank you very much.
It's great to be here and in good company. I guess starting with just conversational sort of ideas and thoughts. Marcelo, is there anything that you wanted to start out with or bring up right away? Or
I don't know. Did I ever tell you my birthday is actually Dia de los Muertos?
is it really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, my birthday is Dia de los Muertos, 1989. I was born November 2nd.
So I would definitely recommend you go to Mexico one of these years for the Dia de los Muertos celebrations.
That being said, we can just jump into that was the whole precipice of me going to Mexico City in 2016, and we went for my birthday. We went a little early, but the idea was to be in Mexico City for the national holiday of Dia de los Muertos, because I never, it's not celebrated the way it is here. Over there, it's huge. I mean, everyone, people are off work. It
is definitely more celebrated, or I should say, it's more spectacularly celebrated in the areas where there are indigenous communities that are still thriving. So Central Mexico, Southern Mexico, those are the areas where you really see the sort of the cross of Catholicism and ancient indigenous spirituality. And so like your work, if you don't mind me jumping in, like your work, there's definitely a lot of images of mythology, images of cosmology, and sort of the heroes, you might say, right?
Yeah, the hero's narrative, for sure. I think that's one of the things that's most intriguing, I think, to me, is like the hero narrative or like the warrior's narrative, because there's always this sense of confrontation and obstacles that must be overcome, battles that must be won. And maybe I just assimilate or associate with that in my subconscious. But, being an artist and being Latino, and for me, finding art and then having to always, have this sense of, I have a chip on my shoulder in a sense where it's like always wanting to be better, wanting to achieve more, and, the worldly obstacles that the world puts in front of you when, there's these, when you're brown and you're self-taught and you don't have the right paperwork or whatever. So to me, I've always kind of had a warrior's mentality to, push yourself beyond your own physical and mental capacities, and then almost achieving this sense of enlightenment through these difficult times. I think when you're pushed in those difficult times is when you really have growth.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I think challenges and oftentimes failures are really what make us who we are.
Failures, I've had a lot of those.
You know what? Anybody who's worth what they do has had a lot of those.
I know.
I always tell people that the National Museum of Mexican Art is as successful as it is these days because we've made so many mistakes, and I honestly believe that, and I mean that. And I think in the arts, it's a beautiful thing that artists can experiment and can just do something and maybe it doesn't lead anywhere, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes it does, and that's okay. It's okay.
See, no one told me that. It was, yeah. So every time.
Let's start with a question about exactly what you said. Nobody told me that. One of the things that really stands out in your practice to me is sort of the self-taught nature of it, right? You've had some schooling. You read up on things. You buy current catalogs, and you are very much aware of the art world in which you swim. But when you look at your career or your CV or your resume, the one thing that other artists have that you have chosen not to is that degree, right? That piece of paper, the BFA, MFA, whatever it is. And so let's talk a little bit about that, about your research. You haven't been provided a class and a textbook and a professor's conversation and curriculum.
Right.
You sort of have to go out there and gather that on your own. So I'm interested about that. I'm interested in what motivates you in your research, and how do you maneuver that? How do you know which way to go? How do you decide where you're going to next in terms of research?
In terms of research, how I make, well, first, I think I have to be visually attracted to the subjects in a way where I want to draw it, and I want to replicate it in one way or another. And in many cases, earlier in my career, I was attracted to things that were very expressive, raw, materiality, surface. And I think those things are still prevalent in my practice, but they're not so much like the main focus. I think now they're just tools that I've put in my toolbox. And when I do my research, I think if I don't know about something, I literally envelop myself in everything about it. For example, like when we went to Mexico City, I went to every institution that was open in the time period while I was there. Mm-hmm. And then in doing so, buying books from the gift shops to bring back home. And then when you're doing this research, and then and then reading these names or cultures in these books, and then looking at further information on the internet, and then going and then finding different sources of information from those cultures. Like I'll not only hit up Google, I'll hit up YouTube, I'll hit up Spotify, I'll look up, Mayan music, and then just like these different avenues of information, and interestingly plugging them into the source of the subject that I'm interested in at the time. So I just try to put my fingers or my tentacles, if you will, in as many things as possible, and then absorb as much as I can. And then while I'm reading, researching, looking, studying, and then once I feel like I'm full, or like my tank is full, then I start drawing. Mm-hmm. And then the drawing process is slower. It takes a little bit more time. It's a bit more leisurely. Mm-hmm. And then, because I know that's like the beginning stages. That's like cooking for me. So like in cooking analogies, it's like prepping the vegetables, and then once everything.
You have a sketchbook? Is that what you're, when you say you sketch, is it on sheets of paper? Is it on a sketchbook? I'm just curious as to, when you have that piece of paper, is it more like a journal, or is it more like a practice sketch?
Both. Well, no, it's like I have journals. I have books that are journals that have drawings in them. And then I have books that are particularly just for drawing. And then I have large rolls of paper for larger works on paper.
And those larger rolls is more like in your studio practice, that would be something that you would maybe tape up or tack up on the wall.
No, I've always found more comfort working on the floor.
Okay.
I don't know. Maybe it's like something I learned, when I learned about Jackson Pollock and Indian sand drawing and, Basquiat, and they all worked on the floor.
Sure.
So I found more comfort working on floor. I still do. And for a while, there was a point in my practice where I would buy a tarp from Home Depot and I would just begin in the center and then work my way out. Like a child with a giant tarp. And I found that very intuitive. And ever since then, I find more comfort. I'm getting old now, though, so I might buy a drafting table.
Drafting tables are good.
Your drafting table, you know, your back is not the same when you're 19, 21. But no, for the most part, I do find more comfort working on the floor. There's this childlikeness that I like to hold on to, especially when working with like oil pastels that feel like crayons.
And let me ask you this: so when you're drawing on the floor, when you're creating artwork on the floor, does the piece have sort of like a horizon line on it, or does it not? I'm just asking because I feel like after a while, I mean, so you're always sort of facing the same way and working with an up and down, I guess.
Well, no, that all depends because, like, you know, it depends on the scale of the paper. It depends if I'm doing landscape format or portrait format. I don't really ever start with a horizon line. I think I challenge myself by finding the most difficult part of the sketch and starting there, because I'd rather confront the most difficult part first, so then I know the easier parts would be at the finish line.
Sure. Enjoy the end.
Yeah, I want to enjoy the end. And I mean, I haven't right now, since I've been so busy, I've just been working on like ink drawings, and this is like on an 8x10 sketchbook, very small, very intimate. Like I could casually just work with my markers, with my ink pens. The last work on paper that I made in my studio was about a 24x17 paper portrait size. And this was an oil pastel. And the interesting about it is I started the frame. So it was based on the back of an obsidian mirror from, I believe, the pre-classic period from the Mexica culture. And it had like a swimmer on a boat with like two dragons' faces, and then there's all these tentacles coming out from the sides. And then on top of that, you have four heads. So I started the work on paper, I would like with the four heads with the outside. So I remember someone told me one time, the best artists start on the edge and then work their way in.
Okay.
So then I've always taken that philosophy and like doing the hard part first.
Sure.
So then I started this drawing, and like I said, I started on the edge. I did the four faces. And then the thing about me prior, like I would finish that, you know, when I was younger in like a day. But for some reason, like, I let things marinate longer now in my studio, and that took 4 months to finish.
Wow.
You know, obviously I have like more things going on now, but I wasn't also in a rush. And that was a new feeling for me, starting something, you know, having the idea already started and then finishing it months later when, you know, you could say the moment's already gone.
Yeah.
But, and that was something that I was dealing with when I was jumping back in it, you know, jumping back in the drawing, trying to find that idea that I was holding on to when I found the object that I was attracted to, the subject, and wanting to replicate it. And that was hard, trying to get those wheels in motion again. But I liked the challenge because then it reminded me, it showed me that I had nothing to fear when working, because you know, it's like you're gonna reconnect with it anyways. It's like riding a bike, I guess. Like if you were to say the easiest thing, it's like riding a bike. And then there was a moment where I thought it was ruined. I thought like, oh, I'm not gonna find it. Like the spirit of the drawing's gone. And then instead of walking away, I just pushed further.
Sure.
I went harder. Like I had applied more pressure. I worked faster, gave myself less time to make decisions. And then I decided, like, I gave myself like this, oh, I'm gonna finish by the time I leave. Like, I'm gonna finish this today.
Do you ever walk away? Is there ever a time that it's kind of like, this is just not gonna work?
Yeah. I mean, like, I've definitely, I think every artist, at least every painter, you know, you learn, like you said, you learn from your mistakes. And I've overworked many works, and you know, it's like beating a dead horse at that time. But now as I'm older, like I think I've just found like the moment. I've gotten better at finding the moment when to stop, walk away, let it dry,
For sure.
and then come into question again. Do I want to touch this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or is it, did that work actually, is it the work fulfilling what I'm trying to say with less work?
Sure. Sure.
I think like going back to that, what you're saying, like that piece of paper,
Uh-huh.
I used to think I had to put a lot of work into my works,
Right.
almost like overcompensate.
Yeah. And let me ask you this: when you're talking about subjects that you are aesthetically drawn to, does that material, that subject, does it have something? Do they have something in common? Is there something you could say like, oh, look at the things that I'm most drawn to they're kind of like this, or they're kind of like that? Is there anything that they have in common, or?
Yeah, I think a lot of the stonework that I'm attracted to from Mesoamerica is the more complicated ones, the ones with a lot of lines, the headdresses,
Sure.
the portraits, the stucco portraits.
Uh-huh.
Um, I think I really like the stucco portraits, and just like the intricacies of the
Right.
patterns. I think I'm
Right.
attracted to that because it's a really nice juxtaposition with like my mark making, because I think my mark making is very expressive.
Mm-hmm.
So to see those two existing hand in hand in a piece, to me is I find visually interesting.
Yeah, I can see that. It sounds like earlier on in your career, you were sort of working out the medium, meaning mark making, pastel, oil, and
Yeah,
really sort of working out sort of abstract pieces and composition.
yeah,
Uh, Maybe composition and color might have been the subject matter, and
yeah,
now it seems as though, as you said, those are tools in your tool belt now that you can now draw upon when you are working with a new subject matter, such as an ancient deity, a spiritual icon, or a warrior.
yes,
Um,
absolutely.
let's, being from the National Museum of Mexican Art, what I'm drawn to is when that sort of started. I know you're sort of looking, and there's never like a moment, right? It's always kind of like it's a time period. It's maybe a couple of years where you start sort of filtering in this new subject matter. When that happened, did that have something to do with the trip that you took to Mexico, or was it purely research of ancient identity, sort of?
No, I mean the research of ancient identity that came after.
Okay.
My trip to Mexico was a self. I think I like found myself. I reconnected with who I was. I think the perception of being Mexican American,
Mm-hmm.
and all the notations that it has in the United States, and all that weight that's here, and then
Yeah.
going over there, and then
Yeah.
seeing a whole different picture be painted
Sure.
was very eye opening.
Yeah.
But the very moment that I think I fell in love with uh, the ancient culture was when I walked to the top of the Sun Pyramid.
Mm,
I
right.
mean,
Sure.
it
Yeah.
was so moving. I mean,
Yeah.
the trek up the pyramid is like transcendental,
Yeah.
and then to be up there and have this sense of fulfillment, and then you are literally in the sky.
Yep. Yeah. For people who maybe have not been to uh,
Teotihuacan.
Teotihuacan, it is there's pyramid of the sun and pyramid of the moon,
Hmm.
and the sun is gigantic. It is. I mean, people start it going up, and then sometimes they don't reach the top because they just get a little nervous. The steps are very small, so just even
Yeah.
going up the stairs it's precarious. So I
And the
mean,
stairs are narrow. The stairs are
yes,
very narrow.
yeah, and as you're getting to the top, you start like hanging on a little bit more because you
Hmm.
realize the
You can
height.
fall.
It's yeah, it is a journey to go up that pyramid, and then once you're at the very top, the view is fantastic. It sounds like you were also moved by just looking over the valley of Mexico and seeing
Yes.
the other pyramid below you, and that whole area. And then the only thing I want to throw out there is that then there's a journey down, which sometimes is scarier, than the journey up. It's interesting that that moment really sort of is encapsulated now in your artistic career. That moment sort of, it seems like maybe there was a realization or a fork in the road, or something, a door that opened to you artistically.
Because, you know, they also have the museum on the
Yeah.
grounds.
Yep. Yeah.
So I think when I was, because I'd already gone to the Museum of Anthropology the day before.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, we didn't have a lot of time there, so we were rushed.
Yeah, that's
And
that's
then-
like a 4-day museum, by the
Oh,
way.
I know. No, I know. I've gone twice, and it's
Yeah.
still not enough. It's
Yeah.
still not enough. It really isn't. It's colossal. But so then we went to the pyramidas, and you know, we're in their institution.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, I think, the moment I was like, why is, in my mind, the question that erupted was like, why is no one, like, why don't I see more of this? Like, why isn't it like in the States? Like, why is this aesthetic not communicated in contemporary art? And that's like, and I think like you were saying, it was like a fork in the road and a door opening. Because at the time I was having moderate success with the style of work I was making, which was how I was able to financially pay for the trip. And then when I came back, you know, was the 2016 election. And then that moment that for everybody had different side effects. So I'm in my studio after the 2016 election. And at the time I'm working with all this monochrome, and this is like after the trip, and everything was in black and white. So I felt like I was at a funeral. Like I had just left Mexico. I was pouring inspiration out of all my pores. I wanted so much color. I remember the day I landed, like I pulled out 2 canvases in my living room studio, and I like painted, you know, stuff from like the catalog from the Museum of Anthropology. Nothing compared to what I make now, but you know, it wasn't even in the language that I was making, and I was like inclined to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, the funny thing is that so you mentioned the relationship between ancient Mesoamerican works of art and then modern art, right?
Yeah.
There was a time in the 1920s,
Right.
when those two things sort of, they took hold of one another, and that's because we had artists in Mexico. You know, Diego Rivera is probably the best known, but there were certainly other artists. They would send them to Paris, and they would send them to Europe to study and learn modern art. And you know, they met various artists down there, Gauguin and Pablo Picasso, and you know, many of those artists in Europe were looking to Africa for kind of like the missing spirituality in the modern world was found by the artists in
Europe, in Africa.
Yes. So they would look to Tahiti. They would look to these different cultures that were very much a mixture of their mythologies and their cosmic understanding and their artwork. And then when these artists came back to Mexico, they realized that they didn't have to look to Africa or Tahiti.
No,
all they had to do was look around in Mexico. So the Purepeche indigenous people, the Huichol, and then going to these museums to look at the artwork, and that sort of fueled their modern creativity. It sounds kind of like you may be on a similar path.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's interestingly enough that I feel more connected with like the you know, the 3 giants, like what is it, Siqueiros, Rivera, and I forget who's the third. Orozco. I mean, I personally like Orozco more than Diego. Diego's like Mexican Picasso, like he has different time periods, right?
He's an illustrator. He illustrates history, but yes, you're right. Go ahead.
And then, but definitely like, you know, these Mexican Americans looking to the past and then facilitating those histories and narratives through their timeline that they exist in today. Because I think that's always interesting, because I remember like, you know, when I was really young, like, you know, always hearing in documentaries, like a great artist reflects the time that they're alive in. You know, like you capture the moment. And I think no matter which, if you are looking to the past, you still have to exist in the now. and I think those artists, they did that. They were creating murals, and that gave birth to abstract expressionism. Like Pollock talks about looking to Siqueiros and the scale and the energy of the brushstrokes and the vitality, and these guys ignited the American ABEX movement.
Yeah, without a doubt. And so that connection is a beautiful and real thing. And I think that then what happens later on in the 20th century, mostly out of like California, Texas, and the Southwest, is the Chicano movement. So the Mexican Americans who were born and raised in the United States, they're from the U.S. but of Mexican ancestry. And by this point, by the 70s, they had been there for many generations. Many families actually, they traced their family back to, we were here before this was the United States. Our family, our roots were here when this used to be part of Mexico, when it used to be part of New Spain. And of course, the indigenous groups that live in that area. And so one of the things that the Chicano artists do is they look back at Aztlan and the ancient Aztec civilization as their ancestors. And they developed this whole, it may not be entirely historically accurate, but it is metaphorically and it's mythologically linked. So they link up to exactly what you're doing. They link up to the visuals, the aesthetics. And with that, they find the power, right? Because you can't look at these stone sculptures that you're talking about and not feel
absolutely
the power, the cosmic.
That's what I was overwhelmed with. And I'm like already a sensitive being. So like to be in these spaces that were like worshiping, like, the Valley of the Dead, the Sun Pyramid, the Moon Pyramid, just like being in Mexico City, that land, and just being in Mexico, I mean, exactly, you connect to this like beyond astrological like power that is, it's universally timeless. I mean, it's just, I couldn't comprehend it. I had no way to comprehend it. So like the only way I could comprehend it was putting it in my work. It became so powerful for me that I had to put it in my work.
Yeah, it was clear to me that you're very intuitive. And I think that like all intuitive artists, you can look at something without reading the label and kind of feel what it's about or what speaks to you about it. And then, like all good artists, you absorb that and you make it your own, and then you can sort of disseminate it on canvas, on wood, on paper, however you need to. Tell me a little bit about the whole spiritual idea, right? Because obviously, and we're going to look at some of your images in a bit, but it's one of the things that I noticed when I saw the work in your studio and then at the exhibition, Compound Yellow, is that it does have a strong spiritual through line, and that might not come through to some people. And I don't know if like you need to know a little bit about ancient Mesoamerica to see it or not. I don't know, but I certainly did see it. So talk to me a little bit about.
See it or did you feel it?
Excuse me?
Did you see it or did you feel it, or both?
A little bit of both. Yeah, a little bit of both. I think see it mostly, felt it in some pieces. Yeah.
I guess like for me, spirituality is very important. It's my way of connecting with myself, my subconscious, and the greater universe that exists. I like to believe that the soul is eternal. A lot of these.
Well, you were born on Day of the Dead.
I know. So it's just like, it's like you got to be blind not to see these weird universal coincidences. And so, I mean, like, so like, I didn't even know what Day of the Dead was until I was older. And then as an adult, I came to this realization, like, was I born on that day because I have more of a spiritual connection with those who've passed? Like, can I Do I have this intuitive gift that allows me to have a grander perception of things in the spirit realm? I think for me, spirituality has always been very important because it's a way to, it's something we cannot see. It's intangible. It's unexplainable. I think some people can believe it. It's based in belief, and it allows us to put energy into things, whether they be objects, whether they be words, or writings, paper. And I want to believe that like the universe is more than just, you know, atoms, molecules, and like there are universal laws. And when I was learning about Mesoamerican and all these ancient cultures, is they believed that they needed to be in tune with nature because nature was in tune with the universe.
Yeah.
And you know, I believed that before I learned that they believed like that.
Yeah.
And I
You know,
think
I don't want to get into a critique of any religion or faith.
not at all. No, I know.
But I will say this. I will say this, that many of the more the world religions, oftentimes they evolve or develop to a point where maybe they separate the human experience from nature or the cosmos, right? And I feel that oftentimes the native, the indigenous, the Mesoamerican, those civilizations, there was no distinction. I mean, you know, literally Mother Earth. I mean, it's that whole concept really is more in tune with the spinning of the earth, the passing of time, and the movement of the sky above. And I think that sometimes that awe really comes through in a lot of their works, and it is a very powerful thing. I feel that sometimes when I was looking at your work, Marcelo, I did feel that it wasn't only research into Mesoamerican culture and history, but rather research into a spiritual part of yourself. That's the way some of it felt to me. I don't want to, you know, put definitions on
no. I mean, like my work, my whole career has been a journey of finding self. And you know, to say that I found myself, I mean, I found myself to the most point where I'm like, I know where I'm at in the moment.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's definitive for the rest of my life. Life is long.
Right.
But it has been a self-discovery. You know, like I've used my practice to find myself.
Yeah.
In tune with my spirituality.
Yeah.
And in how my ancestors, like you said, you know, to be in tune with nature, and how they are intrinsically the same. I think being raised within a Christian household and then having to unlearn that and then not realize, but just be shown over time and through people who have, you know, I guess it's been, I'm glad that you see it in the work because it just shows me that, you know, I'm doing something right. I think we should look at some work. What do you think?
Yeah. The two things I just want to reiterate before we look at the work again is the artist's journey in 20th century Mexico, where they look to the past to find spirituality that's missing in the present world. And then the second thing is the Chicano artists, the Chicano and Chicana artists who identify with an ancient cosmology, and they sort of align themselves with the ancient indigenous because they feel that they don't fit into the United States mainstream, and they don't fit into Mexico either. Because
I learned about like the second one, like La Raza, right? Like I learned about like La Raza like in high school. You know, when you're hanging out with other Latinx kids in high school, you hang out, especially in Chicago, you connect and congregate with those you assimilate with. You know, I remember growing up and like the Aztec calendar is in everyone's house, or you know, the calendar with the eagle warrior carrying like the girl, she's like fainted. You know, those, you know, there's that to me was like, those are things that I was growing up, but I think when you're young, you don't know what it means.
Right.
And being Chicanx art, it is a little disconnected if you weren't like educated and researched within the movement. And then I think it's interesting because those images are like integrated in like Latin people who live in America.
Yeah.
Especially Mexicanos, right?
Definitely.
And because and then having like all those like cultures, and then Latin American, Mexican American cultures like Chicano culture. I think having that and being aware of it at a young age was one of the things that like made me want to figure out more.
Yep. You
And
want to decipher the icons that were pretty much around you. Yeah.
Right. And like wanting to understand, where did that actually come from?
Right. Yeah.
What did the original image look like?
Let's see some of your work, please.
So we can start the slides.
There we go.
Yeah. So here we have a Mayan portrait on the left. This is the most recent work on paper in the exhibition. And we have Toluc, which is a Aztec deity or a Mexica deity, one of the oldest and most powerful, one who controlled lightning, rain, was worshipped all the time for, the idea that they could have this power of abundance or disaster. They control floods, but they also control good crop. I painted this particular painting when it rained 5 days in a row in Chicago. I took that moment and I wanted to recapture it. So I titled the painting 5 Days of Rain. And I think it was interesting because, and my perception of rain is like, so not like everybody else's perception. Everybody gets, it's gloomy, it's sad. I'm like, there's abundance happening outside right now. Like, this is like, I flipped the script on it. So to me, that was just like overabundance.
Yeah.
Well,
water is life. I mean,
water is life. Thank you. I mean, water is life. So I wanted to capture that moment and also, give praise to like the God, to Luke, and the image itself is from the Bulgaria Codex. And one of the things that you can tell, it's Tulak. I don't know. I always mess up his name. Is his teeth and his goggles. And the work. If we go to the next slide, I think this is the other side of the room. And here we have 3 drawings from 2019 on the left, a watercolor from 2020 on the right, and then the sun portrait, ancestral sun in the middle. And that is another painting from 2020. And these are all gallery views. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah, so this is like, Sierra did a great job grouping these 3 together.
She did.
They're from the same roll of paper, as you were asking me, like where things start. So interestingly enough, these 3, when I rolled, and the roll was like, I would say it was 48 inches. So pretty big roll. These are on the same sheet that I cut into smaller pieces.
And so did you draw them and then you cut them out?
Yeah. Okay. So they were probably like, ideal was probably like, they're gonna be like one piece. But then I liked them so singularly that I cut them out and gave them their own individual space. Can we go to the next slide? These 2 are probably some of the earlier pieces in the show. These are from these are from early to 2019. So these are like probably like a whole year prior to the ones we just saw. And these are all in color. One of the things about these, I was really interested in the portraits. You can see how these are made. They're a bit more abstract, maybe like closer to like neo-expressionism in their color palette. You can still see a lot of, I don't know how to say it. It's just less realistic.
You were less concerned with making it feel realistic.
Yeah, it was.
And this is pastel? Okay.
Oil pastel.
Oil pastel.
Yeah, different from soft pastel. We can go to the next slide. So here's a watercolor. And I started doing the watercolors in 2020 as a pandemic medium because I wanted to paint, but I had no access to my studio. and this is a way to, you know, have the material in the house, not make a whole lot of mess. So as I was also wanting to learn more about these cultures, I wanted to do it in a way where it was in my everyday. So I also not only like buying books, but I started following Instagram accounts. And there are so many good Instagram accounts on Instagram about Mesoamerican culture. One of the ones is Arke Mayat. And I just like, this is where I found this image. And this is a stucco portrait of a ruler. I don't know if you wanted to say anything about it. Like, so it's,
you know what I keep thinking is I'm not sure if you've been to the Mayan sites yet, but man, I think you would be.
no,
you
I
might
haven't
not
been
come
to
back.
Tikal yet. No, I haven't been.
You
I haven't
might
been
not
to the
come back
Yucatan
if you
Peninsula.
go.
I do. I mean, there's so much in Mexico I want to
Yeah.
visit.
Yeah, because the Mayan, as you know, they were intricate, they were detailed, and they were it was like Baroque before there was Baroque. They
Right.
were overly Baroque, and I think that you would really it would resonate with you and your work very strongly.
And they
That
were mostly on the eastern hemisphere of Mexico, right?
yeah, they're over like in the Yucatan,
Yeah,
in
Yucatan.
present day Chiapas, that area. But I highly recommend that you spend a little bit of time there in I'm spacing on the name. There's an anthropological museum.
Because I know there's Tikal. I want to visit Tikal. That's like
Yeah.
one of the big ones.
Yeah. No, that their work is so different than the Aztecas.
Yes.
You know, they're just very, they reflect the jungle that they live in, right? It's just organic and it's free form.
And
It's
what I love about like their when they would paint on their cups or their mugs, like you could never tell what was the figure, what was the background, what is the hieroglyph. It's just like, and it's flat too. So to me, like when you look at it, if and like after like drawing them so much, I've learned to almost decipher it. Like, oh, this is actually a hand. This is actually like an ear. This is like this is a pipe. This is a cigar or whatever. You learn to find it, and I think like, oh, because like to the untrained eye, it can just look like a whole abstraction.
Yep. Yeah.
Can we see the next slide? Yeah, so this I actually photographed myself. This is in front of Anahuacalli.
That's awesome.
This is one of my favorite. Like I visited last time. So, you know, Mexico City is so big. I made it Anahuacalli on my third visit to Mexico City. And I have to say, it might be more of my favorite than the Museum of Anthropology. If for those who don't know, Anahuacalli Museum is Diego Rivera's personal collection of Mesoamerican sculpture, his own personal collection, and it's a whole museum that he built prior to his death in collaboration with Frank Lloyd Wright, if I'm not mistaken.
You know, so again, it's if you think about it, it's the artist's eye selecting ancient pieces. So it makes sense that you would totally love those pieces that were selected by a visual artist. No doubt.
And the building itself, you know, like they used volcanic stone. There were still traditions that were like maintained and like honored. But then, you know, to have Frank Lloyd Wright help design it is like entirely contemporary.
They say that it's a sort of like a He-Man, the cartoon character, that it's like his castle. It's resembling I should say He-Man's castle resembles that.
Yeah. Really? That's what they say?
Yeah, well, I you know, there's they say a lot online. I just find it funny that
is funny
that there are connections being made to He-Man.
I mean, like when you go to Anahuacalli, right? Like, and also like the journey, it's kind of similar to like going up the pyramid. You know, like you start in the main chamber and it's dark, and after you read that it was designed that way because it starts in the underworld, and then you go and you end up outside in the light. Here, so like, I think, so the movie Apocalypto is like very polarizing for a lot of Latinx people, especially, you know, I think people love it, people hate it, for different various reasons. It's a very polarizing film. I remember learning about it in Latin American studies in high school.
Oh, wow.
It was like a film that I was introduced to. And it was probably one of the first times I was introduced to anything that resembled Mesoamerican culture, acutely accurate.
Yeah.
So, you know, upon watching the film again recently, I was really inspired by the aesthetics and the makeup and design of all the characters and the cast. I think they did a phenomenal job in that sense, in trying to capture the beauty and how they decorated themselves. That's actually, you know, when this drawing was made, was during the watching of the film. Like
Okay.
sitting on the floor, watching TV, and making this drawing while it's just in the background. You can go to the next slide. This is another stucco portrait, and this is one of the ones that kind of inspired, because I noticed like one interesting factor about Mesoamerican portraiture is their eyes are usually like really flat, and then it creates like a round diamond.
Yeah.
Next. So here we have this one.
Great painting. I do like this painting. I know. It's also among your favorites, but the way I saw it displayed, which was a slide you showed earlier, and just the colors and the radiance of it, I think it's definitely one of your more successful works, without a doubt.
Thank you, Cesáreo. I appreciate that. And it's inspired by the Halak Unique, which I believe was like the highest ranked priest / warrior in Mayan culture. And it's inspired by this sculpture, which is probably as big as my laptop. It's like this tiny. And it's at the Anthropology Museum. And you know, when you see the photos on your phone, it looks colossal.
Yeah.
And I painted it that way. But then when I saw it again, when I went to the Anthropology Museum, I was looking for it. And then I found it, and they have it in a vitrine where it has the different rankings, you know, all the way to the top, and this one's on the top, and he's just, you know, he's sitting there, and it literally no more than probably 10 inches, if that.
Yeah, no, a lot of the things that survived because they were buried as part of a burial ritual.
Funeral urns, yeah.
So a lot of them they're not enormous. They're actually something that you would bury somebody with.
So this is the photo I took on the right, and you can kind of see what the painting in the background of the figure would have looked like with the green feathers. And at the same time, like if you go back to the painting, Sierra, real quick, my painting, and then I want to jump forward. So let's look at my painting. The color palette was inspired by Joseph Albers' study. If you go to the next slide. So I was studying Joseph Albers. So I didn't know this, but like during war-torn Germany, the Albers moved to America. Joseph and Annie Albers, but in doing so, they also traveled extensively throughout Mexico, and it inspired his work tremendously. And I was really interested to see how a European modern master, unlike, you know, I'm not saying Diego Rivera, none of those guys were, but they were already like, this was their homeland. And I was interested to see how a European modern master of minimalism would be confronted with almost, you know, like this ancient art form and aesthetic. And he even said it, you know, like the ancients in the Americas have been doing abstract art for centuries. That's what he said.
Yeah. You know, I would recommend you look up Gerso. Gunther Gerso, Mexican, with a not a very Mexican name. And he was an abstract painter in Mexico. And this piece that you're showing us here, there's a relationship. I see a little bit of a relationship with Gunther Gerso, who was also looking at indigenous cultures in Mexico and converting it into his abstract work. So, and then of course the palette was the key. It was, you know, colorful palettes are oftentimes associated with indigenous palettes. So
absolutely. And I was really moved by the colors, because it, you know, Joseph Albers, I noticed with this was using more colors than he usually would. We can go to the next slide. I know we're coming up to the end of time. Here's another study. So here's like this is ultimately what I was looking at. You know, like here you have at the bottom left-hand corner, a much more colorful illustration of the Bulgaria Codex. Then you have the prismatic study of Joseph Albers. And I wanted to, like, you know, the love child of those two things, and then blow it up to a scale that is very contemporary. You know, the painting's 5 feet by 5 feet, and then, you know, isolate, focus only on the deity. A lot of the times when I'm looking at these subject matters, I only want to pull out like one thing. I'm not trying to replicate the wheel. You know, I'm not trying to say like I found something new. I'm just trying to find a focus that like is drawing me and its energy and then amplifying it.
Yeah, yeah.
We can go to the next slide.
That's a great piece.
Thank you. This one I spent that. So here's like, you know, with maturity comes mileage and you know, how to work smarter, not harder. This watercolor I worked on for 3 whole days, like just letting it dry and then like selectively putting the brush strokes and building the figure. And I believe, like, again, this is like, you know, from the Zapotec culture, late classic period in Oaxaca, and this is a funerary urn. And I believe if you look at the top of the headdress, there's also two things of maize, like on the sides.
Sure. Yeah. No, they embedded all of their works with icons and symbols of life, death, birth, renewal.
Right.
You know, a lot of the cycle of life idea came through it all.
Absolutely. And I wanted to paint it in a way that's like, okay, I want it to look like jade. So I wanted to add that symbolism to it, right? You know, this super cherished material that was like worshipped more than gold.
And the jade was seen as having life properties because of its green color. So it was worth more to them than gold, without a doubt.
Yeah, without a doubt. We can go to the next slide. This one was interesting because I don't remember looking at the figure when I drew this, but I think it was a bit more casually like looking at it. But you can see some of the like the chain and the headdress, the cap, and this is a Totec. This is from Oaxaca, and I believe this is at the Museo de Anthropology in Mexico City también.
And you know what, I'm just going to point out one thing to you, and I hope no one gets grossed out. But if you look at the ceramic piece, you see like the circles around the eyes, and around the mouth. It's because he's wearing a mask, right?
And it was usually of human flesh.
And yes, it's usually of human flesh, and even that has to do with renewal and death, right? So in order to grow a new stalk, a new plant of corn, you have to bury the dead seed. And oftentimes, you know, the little skin comes off of it. So there's all these ideas that come through there, and whether you're aware of them or not, you know, the spiritual presence or essence of that piece it definitely is something that you're capturing. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're definitely drawn to it. I mean, I could see it. I look forward to seeing the next iteration of this body of work.
Thank you. Yeah, 2022. I'm very excited. I know I'm planting seeds in my mind now. You can go next slide. So here's an interesting, because this is again from Apocalypto, and this is like the emperor scene, right? Where they're sacrificing on top of the pyramid, and the reference wasn't direct. The reference is after the fact. And then, you know, just kind of knowing that this is how they presented their emperors, you know, very ornate with the feathers all around them. And then I wanted to title the painting Master Plan, which is titled after Sun Ra. It's a song by Sun Ra, which to me is another artist that has a lot of spirituality in his work. And, you know, this, like, it was like almost like a chant, you know, like an affirmation, like the master has a plan. And I thought it was interesting that it was after the fact, when I was looking for my references, that this was the one that was closest to me. And I found it ironic that it ended up being the king saying. You can go to the next slide, please. Here's another stucco portrait, which and I titled it Amanteca, which Amanteca is the workers who were like the masters of the feather works. Like they were the ones who were in charge of like all the feather headdresses. They were the only ones that were allowed to work on the feathers. The Quetzal feathers, if I'm not, am I saying it right?
Yeah, you know what, they actually had all different kinds of birds and feathers that they would use. It's when you look at some of the early when the Spaniards arrived, you could tell that there were artisans who knew how to work with feathers, because a lot of the objects that were being made for the church, for the Catholic Church at the time, utilized feathers. So feathers sort of were transferred to the new religion, the new spirituality, for a while.
Wow, I didn't know that. One thing that drew me to this particular stucco portrait was the mustache.
Yeah, you know what? I was going to mention that too. It's you don't often see
Facial hair.
an ancient piece with a full mustache. Yeah.
I thought that was the most interesting part. You can go to next slide. And here we have a lot of my early studies. This is how a lot of the works start off. By looking at the original and then replicating it, not so much like in explicit detail, but trying to capture its essence. And then, and I think like holding on to the things that I find important. So like disconnecting it and also like keeping its original essence is like the fine line I try to like walk. And then while I'm drawing it in pen and making a study, I'm making it into something new, because then it's going to evolve into like a pastel drawing, which is going to like disconnect further from the original and then grow into something entirely different. And then if it goes into its final reiteration, going into its painting stage, and then how, because each medium is going to have a different action and reaction in my psyche and in my process.
Nice.
And one of the things, no, of course, and for me, for this exhibition, I wanted people to understand like where things started and where they finish. And a lot, like I wanted people to understand how, because I don't think people were always, people just, people think can sometimes like art just manifest itself. Like I don't, and I wanted to show like, no, it takes work. Like I study not only my research, but then I study the images, and then the images evolve over the course of time in this evolution of material.
Yeah. Okay. We're a little bit out of time now.
Yeah, I know. We could probably talk forever.
But I do want to leave you with a couple of things, which is I hope that you continue to go to the source, which means to go to Mexico. I hope you continue to sort of plan them out so that you are going to go feed your soul, and you're going to go feed your palate, and you're going to go feed your career with inspiration. So I would highly recommend that you keep going to Mexico, whether it's ancient pieces in the museums or time spent with contemporary indigenous culture.
I'm also half Ecuadorian, so like I got all of Mexico I want to do, and then there's all of Ecuador and like the Andeans. I still like, I mean, I have enough research I have a bucket list I could probably do into like my 50s probably.
Yeah, well,
but I definitely like this is just like this excavating of self, right? Like, like going back. That's ultimately what this is going to turn into. And that's what also is like so exciting when I realized like I want to turn this into my practice, that I realized like I can, it's something that was how do I say this, like it was it would never run out.
Right. It's an endless well. And I love what you just said right now, an excavation of self. That is the perfect way of looking at the work that you're doing, and maybe a good way to end this conversation.
Yeah, I think so.
On El Día de la Raza today.
Nice. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Cool beans.
Oh,
amazing.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate everybody who's here. Thank you so much for hearing and listening to a conversation between me and Cesáreo. I hope you guys have a chance to see the exhibition. It is up to October 23rd, open on Saturdays. And if you guys would ever like to make an appointment for a private walkthrough, please let me or Sierra know via Instagram, Facebook, or however you'd like to reach us. Again, thank you so much. I appreciate everyone's time. Cesáreo, I appreciate your time and your wise words. I hope this is the beginning of a friendship and we can like continue on. Thank you so much.
Continuation of the conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for tuning into our artist talk tonight. We do have a couple of other programs coming up so that you can see the exhibition and engage with the work that we have at Compound Yellow. Every Wednesday from 6 to 8 p.m. we do host a Tanda with Chuquimarca projects, and Tanda is a cohort program that aids individuals with their research and practice through self-directed and collective learning by way of gathering and sharing resources, conversations, and knowledge. Tomorrow, we will have a presentation from River Kerstetter on pre-colonial Indigenous urban planning and how to imagine Indigenous cities of the future. And Marcelo will also be presenting for the Tanda on the 27th of this month on convictions of the classics on the presence and erasure of Black and Brown bodies in classic and Mesoamerican art. We also will be doing a pop-up coffee shop on Tuesday, on the 19th. So we have an artist from LA who will be coming out and doing a drip pop-up in the small space there. You can come and have a coffee with us, work remotely, and enjoy some great music. And then the exhibition does close on the 23rd of the month, and that will be in conjunction with the Multiple Goods Fair at Compound Yellow, where many makers and artists will be selling their goods. So make sure you stay in tune with that. Follow us on Instagram at AMFM Life and Marcelo Eli Sarmiento. And make sure you check out the Day of the Dead, the Dia de los Muertos exhibition at the National Museum of Mexican Art. It's wonderful, and they do have programming around that as well too. And check out their upcoming ball as well. So
How long is the exhibition up? I'm sorry, how long is the exhibition up and in at the National Art Museum?
The Day of the Dead exhibit is up until December 12th.
Okay.
So, and we're always free, so no reason to not swing by.
Yep. Thank you. Everybody, thank you so much.
Thank you and have a great evening. See you all soon.
Buenas noches.
Buenas noches.
Bye.